All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane Thayer, and I'm the program manager of Artists in Residence in the Everglades. Double checking that I'm unmuted. Perfect. AIRIE, which is the acronym for Artist in Residence in the Everglades, works in partnership with the Everglades National Park to empower artists to think creatively and critically about their relationship to the environment. We are greatly appreciative to our partnership with the Everglades National Park and their support of artists as creative interpreters of the Everglades. Today's event is part of our monthly series, AIRIE Asks, which is a platform where AIRIE Fellows and other partners share their work. I'd love to thank our donors to our program, a few of which are the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, the Perez Crearte Grants Program, Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, just to name a few. Your continued support of our programming is greatly appreciated. A few housekeeping notes. There is live transcription available, so I believe you each can control that individually. The artists are going to answer questions at the end, so if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. While chat is enabled, I believe, I'll double check, the Q&A box is where we'll be looking for questions. And then please feel free to stay until the end of the conversation. We have a brief audience survey and your feedback's helpful for us as we work to provide more programming that connects with our audience and community. I'll also speak after the conversation a bit more about performance coming up next month in the Everglades National Park on April 17th. And I'll also give you more information about our application for our 2022 residencies, which open on April 1st. So now on to the main event. Hi, Adler Guerrier and Elizabeth Withstandley. Today you're going to hear from both of these artists. Elizabeth Withstandley was our artist in residence in January. She's now based in Los Angeles and is a filmmaker and interdisciplinary video installation artist who uses sound, video, music, photography, and sculpture in her projects. And she is also one of the co-founders of the Miami art space we all know and love, Locust Projects. Adler Guerrier was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and lives and works in Miami. He works in a variety of media, materials, and techniques from photography to collage, and is a friend and colleague to Elizabeth, and he'll help guide the conversation through the adventures she had while investigating the identity of the Everglades through myths, truths, stories, and legends. And if you check out our Instagram feed, there's a great picture of Elizabeth with an 8-foot Burmese python that she hunted on a trip with Swamp Apes, which is a local organization that serves veterans dealing with PTSD by leading them into the Everglades on python hunts. That's a pretty great photograph. And she also has some other beautiful photos that she posted during her Instagram takeover while she was in the Everglades. So without further ado, I would love to hand it over to longtime friends and collaborators, Adler and Elizabeth. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, Jane. All right. Should we start with pythons?
We can, you know.
How is the experience of going after a species that's not really loved around here?
I mean, it was really interesting. You know, Jane mentioned that Swamp Apes, the organization that I went out with, were fantastic. The experience of just sort of taking this canoe and hopping on this like little island that you like, you know, have to break through all of the brush and look for the python was, it was fascinating. And, you know, then finding it was like, wow, there it is. Like, you know, you hear these stories that, oh, there's all these pythons in the Everglades. And, you know, when you see this huge one just like sitting there in the sun, and you see, you know, that the aftermath of the pythons, the lack of, you know, mammals that exist now in the Everglades is, you know, it's unbelievable in a way to see how much that they have taken away.
Did they open its stomachs right then and there, or?
No, so because there's a state process where they're, they want people to go and hunt them, so you can, be a designated to do that.
Right.
And they have to bring them back. They have to measure them. They have to give the, exact GPS point of where they were found. I guess so the state can, track the information and try to see, are they making a dent or not?
Yeah, I think the numbers are so large is that we hope we're making a dent, but it's not doing anything is worse, clearly. But how much of even thinking about how pythons took over a section of the Everglades, and thinking about approaching the Everglades as a site of legends and myths. I mean, for me, that's even the python's is already a vehicle for extraordinary immensity that the Everglades hold in narratives and trajectories. Will Python come on through the film project somehow or another?
It might. When I went to the Everglades, I just wanted to explore various avenues that, different things that do define the Everglades, and the pythons, I think, is one of them. At this point, they're there and they've been there for a while. So, I wanted to explore all these different avenues to see how I could kind of build my story, or, what made sense as an entry point for me, and, how I go about my work. And I like that. I mean, I like exploring, so it was interesting to the python hunt, to see something for yourself.
Yeah, I think the other thing too about the Everglades is it is layered that way, right? And so much of the layering is low, right? It is the brush, it is the grass, and I guess slightly underwater. It's not something you can truly see from afar as a kind of an object or a twinkle on the landscape, and you go after it. You kind of, I guess the python hunters clearly have skills, but the Everglades itself has a density that requires the trek, that requires the boots on the ground and hind hopping and canoeing and things like that. But once you first made your proposal to do a project at AIRIE, what was the sort of initial short list of interests, that things you may find in the Everglades?
Well, I was interested, in just exploring this identity of the Everglades, and I was thinking of doing something with people's perceptions also. Florida is a very unusual state. With
maligned most of the time, I must say.
With the top of the Everglades, Walt Disney World is right there, and that kind of fabricated reality that exists there, and then this huge area. The Everglades is massive. That not that many people really know much of anything about, or really understand, or have taken the effort to actually walk into the water there. So I was interested in these things, but I didn't, COVID came, and it challenged me a little bit, because I was thinking, oh, maybe there's something trivial to this people's perceptions and the reality. So it just sent me down a different path of wanting to look at it more like a place to explore, when photographers like Carlton Watkins crossed through the West in the mid 1800s and was photographing this land that nobody had seen before. So the more investigating I did into it, I wanted to sort of explore that path a little bit, these, you know, unusual people that located to the area, like, you know, Edgar Watson, you know, who was, it's with that little bit of the Wild West feel where there's just anything happened down there.
Who is
That was
Edgar
an entry
Watson?
point. So he was like a criminal in the turn of the century, 1800s to 1900s, and he you know, had some land down there near Everglades City, and he was a bad guy. Like, he was definitely like not a good person. He had people come and work on his farm, and instead of paying them, he would just shoot them and you know, put them adrift there in the water. So eventually the whole town, you know, had enough, and they killed him. So there's all these great stories like this. And, you know, then like a more sort of contemporary entry point for me was the Value Jet flight 592, which went down in the Everglades on May 11th, 1996. And I don't know why I gravitated so much to that story, but it captured something for me that was intriguing. You know, just, you know, planes go down, it happens. And I think the interesting thing for me is how that plane went down, and the lack of stuff that they recovered in terms of both the plane and the people. It just, you know, the Everglades just engulfed it.
Was was that flight? Did it have passengers and cargo? Was it cargo on the?
It was mostly passengers. So there was the 110 people were on board, both crew and passengers, but it was a passenger flight. But the cargo is what brought it down. The cargo was mispacked, and there's a whole thing about it. There's actually still an FBI on the FBI's most wanted list is one of the guys that packed that Value Jet plane that led to it going down.
I do remember something to do with maybe dry ice or compressed air.
Yeah, it was compressed air.
Right, and I think when a few months ago, when Pfizer was approved to get a vaccine, and I think because they require so much of refrigerated cabin, I think this sort of they had to raise the limit of how much, I think, dry ice or something like that in the airplane to allow Pfizer to bring in the vaccine. I think it's connected to the Value Jet flight, at least the mishap of Value Jet sort of lowered how much stuff that was in there. But I don't totally remember for sure. But yeah, that's actually quite interesting that the Everglades as being the site of the crash and sort of, in essence, took in a whole plane and people and most of the debris. I mean, I remember a picture of the sort of muddy crash, but I guess I never really looked into more detailed images of the site. Did you happen to look into the detailed images or any published images, I should say?
Yeah, there's not a lot, because the images, you basically are just looking at the Everglades, like you're not seeing
just
anything.
mud. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they pulled some parts of the plane out, and then, you know, I read some articles where you hear about the floats and the things, personal artifacts that floated up to the top, like purses and wallets. And this one article, you know, I read, you know, talked about how these things were then just packaged up and sent back to the next of kin. So sometimes people would receive a wallet of their loved one, and that's the only thing that they got. And it's still like embedded with the Everglades. Like, it's, you know, it's wet and you know, dirty.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that I mean, that's still in line with the sort of perception of the Everglades in a way, at least for me, of being this completely overwhelmingly large ecosystem that can that can just swallow a plane, a crash plane. And it's not the plane part, it's really the way it swallows narratives and lives and sort of the complex layers that's adjacent to it. I do find there's something about the southern landscape of South Florida, not the east part where I live here in Miami, that is kind of on a slightly higher ridge, but west of us, all of that is like, yeah, it's dense and just swallows things, and it wants to level things. Things wants to stay flat in the Everglades, and I guess and wash down slowly, which is kind of interesting because we want, I mean, the sort of part of the arc of narration, things cannot just stay flat. There must be heights, there must be dips, but the Everglades wants to resist all that. So how, as a narrator or filmmaker, how will you deal with the Everglades' resistance to be more elastic in a way?
I mean, I think that's the thing that maybe fascinates me is like, I feel like there's all these little hidden stories there, that, you know, these people went down in this plane, and there's stories there, and, you know, people who were trying to understand the land and trying to cross it and not at all understanding what they were going to come in contact with, and, you know, made very poor choices because they tried to address the land like it was something that it wasn't. So, you know, it gave me the opportunity to, you know, get into the water there, which is really nice. And everybody really should do it, because you can just walk into the water there, and the water is clear, and there's all these amazing plants that live, you know, below the surface, which just in looking down at the water, you know, which is maybe in areas is just a couple feet, you're just seeing all this amazing like plant life.
Especially in January when it's not rainy season.
Right. So, you know, I was intrigued with going to different areas of the park and filming, you know, some of these forgotten spots like Old Ingram Highway, you know, the old road that went down to the end, which is just kind of an overgrown path now. It's really quite lovely to walk there, being sort of less populated with people, and there's, you know, alligators hanging out right there. And,
Yeah,
so,
there's an interesting series on Netflix, is the Planet series. I think with David Attenborough as the host, and one of the episodes was shot on the Everglades, and it has like this pools of I don't know, pods of dolphins that are hunting. That was actually a most beautiful sight to see. I mean, it is true. There's so much of the Everglades which is not made for the eyes of. It's not set for the eyes of humans in essence, right? It's like it's large enough to swallow, but yet there's places to sort of register, you know, old paths and little, I guess, nooks and corners where, well, maybe not corners, but nooks and little islands, I guess, that are slightly higher, that sort of represents a place where, you know, someone rested or someone made plans or bad guys were hiding at one point or the other. And so, yeah, that's one of the interesting things for me about the Everglades, and that it is both dense and thin simultaneously. And I guess there's both an easy access to deep part of it, but you have to go beyond, you know, that first mile.
right.
Which brings the question: how far west did you go, and with?
I mean, so I tried to explore as much of the park as I could.
Okay.
So, I went over to Everglades City. The Gulf Coast is just a really different world there, which was interesting to me, as I had never been there. Actually, I had never been to the Everglades before this residency, which is surprising given that I did used to live in Miami. But there's, a lot to explore, and certainly, like, if you have a canoe and maybe have a good map and understanding of the waterways there, there's even more to explore. But I did have the chance to get out, in a kayak and explore as well.
And I know AIRIE puts you in contact with park rangers and other scientists. Was that a helpful experience? Did interesting insight come out of that?
Yeah, definitely. The park, being within the park rangers, the different, sort of public events that they do, and things that you can do with them were all fantastic. Especially given that I just didn't know anything about the Everglades.
And yes, you wanted to come back from ventures into the Everglades, so it's good to go with an expert.
No, it was good to understand, because, like, I think everyone's perception is like, oh, there's alligators everywhere, and you have this perception that you couldn't just pull your car on the side of the road and walk into the shallow water there, but you can.
Oh, okay. But only though it's, well, I guess it's also large enough. I mean, this place couldn't, if the place was 100% alligators, we wouldn't have a python problem. That's it. Tell me again about Value Jet. I know you mentioned one of the passengers is a musician and is very an intriguing narrative in himself, and that has influenced your thinking about this project. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Just in my sort of investigation of that Value Jet flight, I learned that there was a musician named Walter Hyatt on the plane, and he had a band called Uncle Walt's Band. And it was kind of a good entry point for me, kind of discovering him. Music has been a big element in my work, and I think it's often a nice starting point for me, and a nice kind of sort of little backbone to my work. So I started listening to this song that he wrote in the late 70s called Getaway. Which is, it's got a real 70s feel to it. But it's a really fascinating song that, kind of makes you think, oh, somewhere, was this destiny of the plane going down? Was this somewhere in his subconscious? Because if you really look at the words of the song, and think about it in that context, it's kind of peculiar, because he's talking about this getaway, and that I think the main chorus in this song it says, someday all the children of the heavenly kingdom gonna run away, make a getaway. And it's just peculiar. So I'm trying to work with the song and work with the musician to do a new cover of the song that will be integrated into the installation.
So what I do like about that sort of structure in your practice is the way you work with, already made work. So a piece of music is already a complete piece of thing in itself, or a reference to Bastian Harder is an already complete art object in itself. And sometimes trying to work with a different artwork allows one to approach, I guess, situations and landscapes and places in an interesting way. I mean, it sort of emphasized that, you know, even a place like the Everglades that is massive and not completely known in a way, itself has a lot of layers that are connected to other things, and those can be interesting entry points to something that is so present, because the Everglades is not exactly a secret, but at the same time, it's like, how do you approach it, right? It's not, you know, it's more than the physical. It's also, I guess, kind of a conceptual entry point is connected to those who are there, and I guess we can say this gentleman, this musician, he is there. I mean, he's interned there now, and an interesting way to honor the dignity of a life is to find, you know, the good works that a person has done, and I think that would be in his case a piece of music. I mean, I find it a lot more interesting of a view of an entry point than, let's say, you know, than thinking about the laws of the FAA does about, you know, gases in airplanes. That's, you know, it's kind of obvious, the points with that, but a song still has layers of interpretation, and how much of someone's music they carry with them in different aspects of their life. I mean, that will be part of the challenge in setting this song with, I guess, images of the Everglades. I mean, is this something that is working out, or I don't know? Is this an easy marriage between this song and images of the Everglades?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's interesting to me because, you know, the song lives on. So, you know, unfortunately, this man, Walter Hyatt, isn't here anymore, and the other, you know, 109 passengers. But there is something interesting that he's sort of left this piece with us. And, you know, it's like in looking at the Everglades, you know, you see that cycle of life, and that there's something interesting to thinking about, you know, more than sort of our finite, you know, human existence, which is just, you know, nothing in the scope of time. But looking at, you know, maybe all the things that the Everglades have cycled through in the years, and what's to come in the future. Looking at it in that sense, and you know, using this song and this legacy and this connection to the past and path to the future, I'm interested in you know, making all of those things kind of work together.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I mean, you mentioned the idea of what remains sometimes, just sort of floats on that surfaces or get caught in a bush or a branch or something. Yeah, a piece of music would be an interesting one. It would be. It would be, I guess, yeah. It's very, yeah. There's a good gesture there that I kind of like. I'm working on a project around a cemetery, and this one cemetery site, in essence, it retains little of those who are interned there, and it seems like in the case of the Everglades, accidentally sometimes there are things that hovers that can connect to that life that was lived, and that's a very good connection, because you're right, the temporal aspect of the Everglades, not just the geography, is also humongous. A life get lost there very easily. Are there parallels in strategy then to the way you've worked in other places, like in Utah, the Salt Lake? desert. Is that a desert?
Yeah. The
Salt
salt
Lake?
desert, the Bonneville Salt Flats, yeah. I mean, yeah, I suppose if I look back at some of my recent projects, where I either was exploring Iceland or
Oh, in Iceland, yes.
Death Valley or the Bonneville Salt Flats, or even Ireland. You know, when I went there maybe 4 or 5 years ago to shoot something, you know, there's interest in sort of exploring new land, I guess. So I think probably my interest in coming to the Everglades, you know, that's just something that I enjoy, is
Mhm.
that exploration.
Yeah, I mean, it also, I guess, it is kind of nice also to come back to a place where you've lived and enter through the backyard. Because the Everglades is there's a kind of yeah, it is like a backyard to, in the way, to the kind of structure of making the city a thing and selling itself to the international world. Whereas the Everglades just like, no, we're going to stay like this, even though um, the state legislature is not necessarily making it easy for Everglades to stay like this, but oh well. We have one question from the chat somewhere. Let
Oh
me see
yeah,
if I
I see.
can raise it up. What struck you most? What do you take away from the physical environment of the Everglades?
That's a good question. I mean, I think what struck me most was, you know, this misperception of uh, thinking that the water, you know, most of the land there, which is covered by water, was more like, you know, dark and dirt filled, like you wouldn't want to engage with it. So I think I was most surprised by, you know, seeing that it was um, this really beautiful, like clear water that you got to see, you know, these plants I've never seen before, and that it was uh, you know, land that you could explore. Like it sort of feels like when you first kind of enter into the Everglades, like, okay, well, there's this road and I can stay on this road. And, you know, there's not a lot of walking trails, but there's some. So it feels like a lot of the land you can't explore, but once you start to understand it, you can. So that definitely was something that struck me about the Everglades.
Yeah, I think the Everglades is actually have great lessons for the future, and that, and I mean, it is clearly, I mean, this Marjorie Stoneman Douglas referred to it as a river of glass of grass for a reason, as it is a water that's moving south and constantly moving. But if we think of the whole Everglades as a river, if we think the whole Everglades as a body of water within which there are these sort of high little ridges in which the water goes around, and low season, i.e. January, whereas I'm sure in July, August, which I've never been out there in that type of, and those years and those months anyway, everything is covered and is really water. But still, it's not off-putting. We can still navigate it. We can still live with it. Maybe that is also a thing, that the Everglades still knows how to live with water in a way that we're not we're
The,
not
the
we're not we haven't owned, I should say.
right. The mosquitoes are still tough there. Like I wanted to do some shooting at night. I think with the second day I was there, I was like, oh, it's a great night. The moon's really small. I'm going to go out. You know, I had equipment on. I thought I was prepared for it. And there, you know, during the day in January, there really aren't that many mosquitoes. So I, you know, got my camera all set up, good to go. But the mosquitoes were just like unbearable at night.
Yes,
So
I
then
believe they're nocturnal, a lot of this.
yeah, then I had to kind of come up with a new solution. Like, okay, I can drive my car somewhere, set the camera up right outside the car. Then because the
Big
shoots were like
refuge.
3 hours, 3-4 hours, I'm sitting there shooting. So then I could hide in the car. uh,
Were there interesting smells in the Everglades is one of the questions.
um, I mean, there, you know, some of the plants there had different smells. There, I think you sort of smell that clean water, that non-salt water, that fresh water. Um, that's kind of all I can recall.
Someone's making an interesting point. The cleanness of water seems to be at odds with the cinematic trope of devouring environment. I'm not totally sure it is at odd, but there is a kind of, that's not the thinking. That in thinking about the identity of the Everglades that you mentioned, those facet of identity, I think, are at odds. That we think of clean water heading south, but we also think of like, it's an environment that in which a whole plane can disappear into. What do you think about that as a kind of a metaphor for the Everglades itself at large?
I mean, I think, you know, that's something that intrigued me. I don't know if it's just from looking at the map so much, or I don't know, maybe keying in on the ranger talks, but you do get this feeling of the water going down. And you know, I guess you don't really, I feel like when I was walking in it, you don't necessarily feel it flowing, but that just kind of feeling of the land. I don't think I'm just going off on a tangent here.
Well, I mean, it is kind of like you said, I think the Everglades is just not one thing, right? It's like,
Right.
and some of the things that it is are, we need poetic language to get there. We need poetic and abstract language to get there. And that opens up all type of inaccuracies on the scientific level, and also, and even inaccuracies from the observational level. But as a large ecosystem, it makes sense, right? That at times the water doesn't seem to flow. I think it's from Stoneman Douglas. She mentioned that the Everglades drops 1 inch every mile. So that's the only statistic that I have from the 1930s. One question talked about, in your experience there, did you feel a sense of danger at any point during the residency outside of the, I mean, I take it, you already mentioned the existence of pythons, alligators, and mosquitoes, but you know.
No, I didn't really. You know, once you kind of understand the alligators, I was not scared at all by walking on a 4-mile path where I wasn't going to see another human and just passing an alligator sitting there. It didn't feel dangerous. And I would say the only time I got a little bit freaked out is on one of those night shoots, because I was sitting in the car for so long. You know, I've got my camera out there, And, I'm trying to pass the time. Like I've got 3-4 hours. It's not really like enough light in my car to read or anything. So one night I started looking up like just more stories about the Everglades, and I started reading, just some weird stuff about like, there's some story about like a boy, like a ghost boy on a boat with like blood red eyes. And so, I didn't really feel endangered, but I did, as I was reading this story, I'm like, why am I reading these stories in the car when I'm alone? And, I definitely felt like, oh, somebody totally could just come up upon me and I wouldn't know. But no, I mean, I didn't really feel endangered there.
Well, that's actually very interesting because in your answer, the only potential danger will come from other humans, which is
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting, right? Because there's a kind of thinking where the Everglades itself is a site that renews us, right? We want to go see the fresh water. We want to go see sunrise and sunset based on wherever you are. And one can easily make peace with alligators and shelter from mosquitoes, but other people's is it's so complex. Like we still live in a world with where the most dangerous thing may be another human whose intentions we cannot read. Okay, we have one more question that says, what kind of aesthetic or artistic approach do you plan on utilizing when documenting your film about the Everglades? I think you sort of pointed to of some of your frameworks. I mean, a side question to that, do you think you got enough coverage of material while you were there?
Well, I'm interested in making a video installation. So it's not necessarily one, piece of video. Something I've been intrigued with in my work is having multiple channels of video kind of all playing at the same time to tell a story. So that's kind of my was my thinking when I was there filming. And I certainly did I would go out shooting every day. Like I've got lots of footage to work with, and lots of, avenues I can explore, and some things that, might not ever get in there because it just didn't end up fitting. But there's definitely a lot.
Right. Okay, I think, I don't know. Do I have more questions? I mean, I think we've covered sort of like the sort of core of it. So Jane?
Guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Adler, for the lovely conversation. I'm looking forward, Elizabeth, to seeing when some of this material comes out. Take your time. Definitely. So I'm going to ask everyone to give you a little virtual round of applause. Someday
Okay, I wanted to say one thing too. I just really wanted to thank AIRIE, and Jane, thank you. It was a really great experience. I think it's a really wonderful organization. It was great, especially during COVID for me, to have the opportunity to, come and spend a good chunk of time somewhere where I could focus on work. And, because the park was so big, I could go out and explore and not, kind of forget that we're in this weird, state of a virus taking over everything. So I thank you so much, AIRIE.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's what we're looking to do. Of course, like an artist residency is of time and space for artists to be able to like really get away and focus on work without all the other stuff that artists have to do all the time. You guys are hustling every day. And one of the things, so I'm going to put a poll, an audience survey poll up. Feel free, audience members, to give us some feedback and let us know that you enjoyed the programming, so we can continue to make programming for our community and audience. And one of the things that I would like to respond to Elizabeth's gratitude is the exciting opportunity that we have coming up. Our application for 2022 residencies is going to be open on April 1st with a deadline of June 1st. And there are going to be some changes, slight changes to our programming, and one of which is being able to increase the financial support that we give to the artists who come to the park, which will go a long way, I think, in sorry, I'm getting messages over here, which will go a long way into giving that space to artists to be able to just really think about their practice. So you can, I'm gonna put some links in the chat. You can head to our website for more information on that. I wanna give you a little heads up about officially Miami Dark Sky Week is April 5th through the 12th. Miami Dark Sky Week is a week dedicated to celebrating the beauty of the dark night sky. You can head out to Big Cypress Natural Preserve, or you can head out to the Everglades National Park around the new moon when you can see all the stars. And I've been told the Milky Way, but I haven't gotten out there yet. And anyway, this week is to raise awareness about light pollution. I'm going to put a link in the chat about the official resolution from the county. And then you can also, I'm going to put link to our events page. We have an event coming up in the park on April 17th, performance between our April Fellow in residence and composer. And then they'll also be talking on this same sort of format later on in April. And you can find all that information on our website. I'm going to stick the links in there. Please, while you're filling out the survey, take a look at that. And for now, I'm going to say again, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Adler. Looking forward to talking again soon and really appreciate your sharing today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Bye. Talk to you soon. All right. Wait. Bye, Elizabeth.